Our next scenario takes place on D+20 and covers the opening day of Operation EPSOM. Operation EPSOM intended to outflank and seize the German-occupied city of Caen, and the main role was assigned to the newly arrived 8th Corps. Their operation was to take place in 4 phases, with the 15th Scottish Infantry Division leading the assault. The 15th Division aimed to capture key villages and bridges leading to the Odon River and face strong German resistance, including counterattacks with tanks. They managed to take most of their objectives, however, despite suffering significant casualties. So at 1800, the Divisional Reserve, 227th Highland Brigade, was ordered to resume the advance, which is where we pick up. The 227th Brigade's leading battalion, 10 Highland Light Infantry, attempted to move to its planned forming up point. However, they found it occupied by panzers. Meanwhile, on the 227th Brigade's left, 2 Gordons, supported by C Squadron, 9 Royal Tank Regiment, formed up in the open to the east of Chirk, below the slopes of Ring Contour 100, which was held by the 7th Seaforths. We play as 2 Gordons, and our mission is to capture and secure the railway crossing point near Colville, so that follow-on units can proceed south to capture the bridges over the Odon River. So again, in terms of where we sit in the grander EPSOM plan, you have Phase 1, which has taken Chirk, and then we have Phase 2, which is pushing across the railway towards the Odon River. Now, before I switch over to the game map, I'm going to look at the ground of the battlefield from this book. And as you can see, we're just south of Point 100, which is to the east of Chirk. And at the moment we're in open country, so this favours tank engagements. But as we'll be advancing south, we'll be moving into close country terrain. So this means winding country lanes, villages, and a mix of farm pastures or woodlines, orchards. We were in command of A and B companies of the 2nd Gordon Highlanders, supported by C Squadron of the 9th Royal Tank Regiment. Also on map are elements of the battalion's support company, namely the Carrier Group. Then to our front, the enemy forces are thought to consist of the 15th Recon Company of the 25th Panzer Grenadier Regiment, 12th SS. So we have a simple plan really, which is to secure the Rue de Salby crossing, which is a stream on the outskirts of Colville. We then want to take Manor 1 and secure the rail crossing, and then we want to secure a flanking position at Manor 2. Our troops are green, having only just arrived in Normandy and have no previous combat experience. So my considerations for this scenario are twofold: ground and strengths. The ground is a mix of open country and fields to our left, which despite the poor weather will favour our tanks. Then close country along a single track road leading into Colville on the right. My main strength against the Recon Company is my armour, but this is vulnerable in that close country. So I figured they should therefore cooperate closely with the infantry, steadily advancing through the fields. We appear to have time on our side with 2-hour games, so this can also be cautious. That open left, however, causes some concerns, so I decided to push the carrier platoon out as a forward recce screen. On the right, I'll probably dedicate a troop of tanks to each platoon, with A Company leading off 2 platoons forward and 1 in reserve. B Company is to follow on initially, sticking with the tanks on the left, but being ready to push through any gaps created by A Company. So we start off in the fields north of Colville, and the carriers of the support company are pushed out as our forward recce. Few turns in, and their efforts prove our fears. So there's a tank spotted on the left side of our advance. Progress to the field's edge remains steady, though, with infantry and tanks moving at a walking pace. Then have a further tank spotted on the left, and I make the decision to push most of our tanks left, covering the fields, with 2 troops supporting A company in their push. Ahead of this we have the carriers dismount and continue to scout the road and fields. And then I make a choice to rush a carrier up, trying to trip any ambushes along the road. We get the first touch objective, but when we mount up our scouts we find we've not pulled quite far enough back, so we take our first casualties. So around 10 minutes in, A companies reach the field edge, B companies following on, and C squadron is an arrowhead formation with 2 troops ready to support the lead platoons of A company. The dismounted scouts of the carrier platoon continue to spot tanks on our left. A company continues cautiously advancing at a steady pace towards contact on the right. And then the lead scouts identify another German line on the left of the road. Inching forward on the left, we get our first tank engagement, destroying a panzer. And over on the right, A company's lead platoons come online to engage the German forward positions. They're supported by a troop of Churchill infantry tanks, and we start to build up a fairly strong base of fire. Back on the left we push tanks to the brow of the hill, so we're aiming to whittle off some more of the enemy's tanks. Once I'm happy that A company's in control of its firefight, I push the second troop of tanks up on the left side of the road, pushing into the first field, supported by a platoon of infantry. When they reach the field edge, they find that the left-hand line is held just as strongly, so A company is now facing what looks to be a static line held by fanatical SS troops. So what we have now is A company on the right, we have B company following them up, and we can also see that the Germans on that left have started a sort of counterattack up the field. With this push we do take some losses, but the Churchill tanks are fairly robust, so even if we do lose the vehicles, in most cases the crew bail out safely. Now I've got a better understanding of the German forward lines, with the tanks engaging in the open country on our left and the infantry on the right. Push forward the squadron and battalion command vehicles and swing round the spare carriers. And what I want to use these for is, again, another rush to try and identify if there's any ambush positions on the road, or if I can get some vehicles up there to do some damage on those infantry lines. And then after an excruciating rush, the corners seem to be taken far too slowly. Turns out, apart from a few rifle grenades or Panzerfaust, you can push a vehicle up, and they make their dash to the corner on the road heading to Manor. So because I'm confident in the road, I push forward the close support Churchills, and I managed to park them on a perpendicular line, shooting straight up the German positions. This finally breaks them, and we're able to start moving B Company through that gap in the German front lines, supported by the second troop of Churchills. We are still taking some fire, but we're now generally dominating the right-hand advance. And then on the left, we seem to have defeated the Panzer counterattack, so we're only receiving sporadic machine gun fire in the advance, which we can handle with tanks. So as we come up to the manor, what I start doing is some Rekiba fire, which identifies sniper positions and machine guns. So now we've got B Company following through that breakout. One platoon's checking the hedgerow on the right. So they're checking the bodies here. And then we've got platoon pushing up to the orchard. On the left, it's continuing to mop up, and then we find in this field immediately off, there's a sort of machine gun platoon. So we're gradually building up the forces on the right to take the manor, with tanks looking to fire onto those buildings. Carrier groups pushing on the left through the orchards, and we've got tanks moving up to the main road on the right of the manor. Get some fire to go into the actual positions. And then to continue the reconnaissance, we've got the carrier platoon again looping round. And we make our first spot on a rather concerning development, which is a Tiger tank. Now with this, we back off from the main road on the right hand side of the manor. Very lucky there, so we're taking 288 hits from the Tiger. But the carriers aren't so lucky, so we messed up slightly. And we do lose one of them, and we start to lose the actual spots on those tanks, which again counterattack. So what I decided to do is push those tanks back into an ambush position just around the first bend. Sections on the corner do manage to take out the commander of the lead vehicle. And then we're almost in position for the ambush on the Tiger as it rounds the corner. Now this vehicle is ridiculously tough, and it takes something silly like 18 hits before it's finally immobilized and the crew bail out in the original playthrough. And it's then followed on by its partner, so it looks like they weren't actually deployed, they were sort of on a road move to try and reach that German line. But second vehicle runs into the ambush as well, and again that is immobilized with the crew abandoning the vehicle. And that gives us at that point enough points to get a total victory. So the German army surrenders in this case, and we've got 20 men killed, 22 wounded. We've killed 130 and wounded 42, with 3 men captured in our advance. Vehicles wise, we've lost 3 tanks and the carrier on that last recce push, but we've managed to knock out 14 tanks, 7 half tracks, and in the original playthrough, so that last turn was actually a recreation due to a save bug. We managed to immobilise both of the Tiger tanks. All of the location objectives were reached, and the casualty tally gives us the points for enemy destruction as well. So we finished off in good condition to continue the advance or to fight off counterattacks. So what actually happened at Colville? Well, just like the scenario, the 227th Highland Brigade advanced as part of the second phase of EPSOM, moving up to the lead at 1800. Despite enemy fire, they advanced across the stream and up the ridge towards Colville, with 2 companies forward covered by a creeping barrage. Now, this was available to me, but I've not yet got to grips with the best use of long call-in times for artillery that appears in the Second World War titles, so it might be one for the next scenario. And now the next part of this I'll read pretty much verbatim from a pretty good article I found here. So from Sergeant Trevor Greenwood of C Squadron's Diary, close to 0 hour, word came that 60 Panthers were on the move, but this is a rumour. There's no more than 25 Mark IVs from the SS Panzer Regiment on the ridge. After an hour, we commenced our delayed start at 6:15 p.m, infantry ahead and rifles at the ready over the crest, towards the woods where we knew there would be trouble. By 7 p.m, the battle was on. Despite casualties amongst the infantry and tanks, the Gordon battle group determinedly pressed on towards the railway line, which was held by the recently arrived troops from the Recce Company 25 SS Panzer Grenadier. The war diary from 9 Royal Tank Regiment records that continuous rain made it difficult to locate targets, and gradually one tank after another became a casualty. C Squadron deployed so that half engaged the enemy tanks, while the remainder pushed on to help the Gordons. Again, this seems to match our split, so half of the tanks on the left, half on the right, in support of the infantry. Meanwhile, the Gordons were having trouble with mortars and snipers as they approached Colville. They did, however, eventually reach the village, and having broken into Colville, the Gordons at that point lacked the strength to hold the village, so they were eventually forced to withdraw under persistent mortar fire. During the fighting in Colville, the left assault company had become separated from the remainder of the battalion and was surrounded. It was then assumed to have been wiped out. So as the Gordons withdrew north across the stream and dug in astride the Chirk Colville Road, the casualty loss for the 26th June appears difficult to calculate because they had declared the loss of the entire company in Colville. But the estimates are in excess of 100, and then also in action for the first time, C Squadron left 8 of their 17 Churchills burning on the battlefield. However, only 3 tank crews were killed, although 50 men were wounded. This again sort of matches our experience with the Churchills and the crew survivals. A remarkable frank view of the fighting on the 26th June 1944 is found in 8 Corps' Midnight Situation Report, which was recorded in their war diary. So, all units except for 3 Royal Tank Regiment were in action for the first time, and the majority of the officers and NCOs gained their first battle experience. All reports indicates that the units were well led, and that troops fought bravely, skillfully and daringly. They were facing an enemy who had fought with fanatical determination in terrain which he knew well and had prepared for defence. The broken terrain was advantageous to the defenders, and the enemy made full use of this advantage. The fighting was mostly at short range. When there were indications of breakthrough on a narrow front, both flanks were open, and the broken ground again helped the enemy. He missed no opportunity to harass our flanks. There's some really good further details in the actual briefing and designer's notes, and I don't think I'm giving the scenario its full credit for what's actually there. So I think I'll probably finish off with a quote from the designer's notes. In that first action, C Squadron supported the Gordon Highlanders with the 15 Scottish, and being half Scot, I was proud to be cited along them. They took a lot of casualties, and that night I remember quite clearly the sound of bagpipes as the Gordons and the other Scots battalions played laments, Flowers of the Forest, to honour their fallen. It made the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. So another quick update, because as I'm playing and reading further, I'm finding out more information about the fighting in Normandy. And the article that I originally looked at was actually just an online copy of this book for Operation EPSOM, which I later bought second hand. And I got a copy of that along with another book on the wider fighting around the area of Hill 112. And as I'm playing through a current scenario covering fighting in Hill 112, I've sort of revisited it slightly and found out a bit more of a clearer picture slightly of what was happening. Now, the author, Tim Saunders, revisited this book, updating it about 2 years ago. And that's the book I've got open on the screen here. So there's slightly more context in this, giving a slightly better understanding of the operation. So Operation EPSOM has a chapter which covers the events of the 26th of June, and it certainly covers the same familiar maps and the ideas, the concept of the operation. But then it's also got this useful plan here that shows where our force fits in. So again, 227 Brigade pushing on as the mobile force after the initial attack of the morning. There's then this useful map which shows the end of the day. So we can see 227 reaches Colville, but then pulls back, digging into the north of it. And then there's this page which has a sort of short explanation of how our battle went, with it hitting a weak spot in the defences. So I think you get the German commander, Hubert Mayer, actually complaining about where the attack hits. So reading from this, they encountered a particularly weak spot of our defences. There was only a weak guard of the Recce battalion which had been moved from the operations area Rore during the night in order to close a dangerous gap here as best they could. Finally, and I don't think it's the exact same event, there's a nice bit further on that covers an incident not too dissimilar to ours where 2 Tigers are knocked out. So again, reading from the book, it took 227 Highland Brigade all morning to overwhelm the Hitlerjuden, in the process knocking out 2 Tigers that had been sent forward into disadvantageous terrain in order to contain the advance. So again, to close, I won't say goodbye, just so long.